Hello, everyone. My name is Chris Wickman. I am on the board of directors for the Ingham County Bar Association. Thank you so much for joining us for this deliberation series. I've said this introduction quite a few times. We're happy to have Ms. Koenig here today. She is a candidate for Ingham County Circuit Court Judge. I'll let her get to that in a minute. The ICBA is a voluntary bar association for Ingham County for lawyers, judges, legal assistants, paralegals, various different people in the legal field. We seek to provide informational, educational, as well as social events to our membership. This is part of our informational event. We don't endorse any candidates for judge, but it's just to provide more information to our members, either live attending today, appreciate everyone being here, or for later viewing. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Ms. Koenig for her introductions. Thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you to the Ingham County Bar Association for doing the deliberation series. So the judicial candidates all have the opportunity to answer questions and to talk about our campaigns. I'm Carol Koenig, candidate for an open seat on the circuit court bench in Ingham County. The seat is being vacated by Judge Lawless, who is retiring. I'll just start at the beginning without taking too much of your time and saying that I'm a graduate of Cooley Law School. When I was in school, I was national trial team, and I won the Book Award for Advocacy. While I was in school, I worked at the Smith Brothers Law Firm in Grand Ledge, and then I was appointed by Honorable Judge James R. Giddings as the special master monitor in a class action lawsuit that was called Kane versus MDOC. That lawsuit involved all the prisoners in Michigan. I'm not sorry, just the MDOC ones, about 45,000 inmates. And it went to the Michigan Supreme Court twice. And it kind of became a political football during that time. So in some ways, my introduction to politics was through that lawsuit. During the 10 years that I served with Judge Giddings on that case, I toured just about every prisoner in Michigan, and I came to know the criminal justice system basically from the inside out. In the time that we worked on that case, we did significant improvements to the Department of Corrections, and we probably saved a few lives along the way. After that lawsuit was over, I opened my own law office of Carolyn Koenig, and I've practiced civil and criminal litigation, including family law. I've been everything from the trial courts, Court of Appeals, Michigan Supreme Court, the federal, Eastern, and Western Bar. I'm admitted to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. While practicing law, I kind of became known for a lot of civil liberties work that I was doing as the president of the Lansing branch ACLU at the time. And that ACLU grew to become a 5-county ACLU that included Ingham, Eaton, Clinton, Livingston, and Shiawassee counties. At that time, I ended up working with the Lansing Police Department to develop and require a system for recording of in-custody felony interviews. And that basically came out of the Claude McCullum case. And he was a case of actual innocence that there were some questions about the interview that happened. And while it was not the police department of the LPD that interviewed him, it was LCC at the time, they were very concerned about the fact that felony in custody interviews were sometimes not recorded. So we developed a system so that at the interview room, when you turned on the lights, it would automatically record every single time. So they would never have to question whether or not somebody's confession had been manipulated. And it was great to work with Mark Alley at that time. He was the chief of the Lansing Police Department. We also worked on developing a policy for requiring police riot gear to always have identifying information on it so that any misconduct by police during riots or anything could be tracked to exactly who was wearing that equipment at the time. It was really important because it was becoming known nationwide that when people are not identifiable, they tend to act a little differently than they might when they are identifiable. So I got to work with the police department in developing a lot of different policy matters that were pretty cool. And we worked with the Michigan Lawyers Guild so that our ACLU members were trained to become neutral observers at events like the Capitol and in East Lansing. Because of my work on some of those things, it resulted in some community members recruiting me ultimately to become a candidate for the Ingham County Commission, because that seat was being vacated by who is now Senator Curtis Hertel. Some community members came together and said, we really want you to run for it. I had never been a political candidate. I didn't know anything about it at the time, but they were willing to help me. And that's what made it manageable. I've now served as a county commissioner for over 10 years. I've been reelected 5 times. I have served as the chair of the commission. I'm currently the vice chair. I'm the past chair of Law and Courts, Judiciary, Finance, County Services, many, many other committees. I currently serve my community in a lot of different variety of roles, some of them coming out of the county commission and some just things that I volunteered for in general. I'm currently a board member on McLaren Hospital, their executive committee and quality committee chair. I also am a board member of Capital Area Michigan Works, member of the Racial Justice Committee of the Lansing Area ACLU, the president of the Gerald Beckwith Constitutional Liberties Fund, trustee of the Lansing Area Community Trust. I'm a board member of Cooley Law School's 60+ Legal Clinic for the elderly. I serve on the County Fair Board. I am also a treasurer for the Community Corrections Advisory Board. I serve on the Michigan State Health Network Substance Use Disorder Committee, which is called the SUD Committee. And I also serve at Capital Regional Airport Authority as their liaison to the Ingham County Commission. In the past, I have done a lot of work with community mental health. I served as their board chair for a while and served on HR, programming, planning, finance, executive, building sites and recipient rights for community mental health. They were one of my favorite committees to work with. I've been president of the Lansing Area Safety Council. I've worked on East Lansing Technology Innovation Center, or they're called the TIC. I was the secretary for the Capital Area Community Services. I was on Potter Park Zoo, County Parks Commission, Tri-County Office on Aging, Equal Opportunity Committee, Women's Committee, Youth Commission, Local Emergency Planning Committee, Tri-County Regional Planning, the ACES Family Center Board, and the Ingham Academy Family Center Advisory Board. I've also served as past liaison to the MSU Extension. But the one thing that I haven't mentioned that I really am probably most proud of was being a founding member of the Cooley Innocence Project at Cooley Law School. I was there when Kenneth Wyamko walked out a prison a free man who was freed by DNA from the Cooley Innocence Project. And that was probably one of my greatest experiences as an attorney. And that basically wraps up some of my past. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thank you very much. Remember, if you have questions, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, or you can put them into the chat or in the private message me, and I will ask them of the candidate for you.
Yeah, Carol, this is Larry Nolan. How are you?
Good. How are you, Larry?
Good, good. You've made Cooley proud of all the things you've done, and it sounds like the only thing you haven't done is get elected to a judicial position.
Sounds about right.
Forgive me, your mother wasn't Doreen, was she?
Yes, she was. She still is my mom.
Well, that's great. She's a wonderful woman and a wonderful attorney. So I tell her I said hello.
I will indeed. I sometimes tell people that she's one of the only people I know who has ever published over 60 law review articles.
Yeah, she's amazing. She's amazing. And she has certainly, I know she's proud of you. So the things that you've done, but this is really fascinating with some of the things you've indicated, because putting numbers or identification on the backs of police officers or people in control so that they were identifiable if they abused. That's so relevant to what's happening today across the nation.
It is.
So
and we found there's actually been studies done, and they've studied it and found that if people are not identifiable, they oftentimes, not always, but sometimes will act differently than if they are identifiable. Sure,
it makes all the sense in the world that they have accountability, and certainly that you've seen in the recent protests and situations that are taking place across the United States. So, why did you decide to run for the circuit court position, Carol?
I have to say it's because it's kind of a culmination of things I've always wanted to do. I have been very engaged, obviously, in being an attorney and being in courtrooms. And I love the idea of being able to fix some things from the inside out. Now, I don't want to suggest that there's huge things that need to be fixed with our courtroom, but oftentimes there's these little things that you can tweak to make the experience so much better for the people who are before you, just to make them more comfortable, to make them understand the process. And I just feel like I have the demeanor and the experience that would be really helpful to the people of Ingham County.
Well, you certainly have a wealth of experience in regards to representation, and the Innocence Project is one of the favorite projects that we have at Cooley. We're quite proud of everything you've done in that regard. So, is this family court something that you have a special interest in?
Yes, I actually do. I have a special interest in it. Some of it goes way back, actually. When I was a kid, my parents were getting divorced, and they took forever to get divorced. And by the end of it, which happens in family law, we were wishing they would get divorced because they dragged it out for, I don't know, 4 years. They separated, they got back together. It was because they really wanted to try and stay together for the family. And as a child at the time, one of the problems was that there was no joint custody in the state of Michigan. So at that time, a judge was going to have to decide who got to own the kids, who got to keep, quote unquote, the kids. And there was 4 of us. And, you know, Larry, you know the way my mom is, she's such an innovative individual that she didn't accept that reality. The fact that there was no joint custody, she thought that was ridiculous. She knew that our father being in our lives was the best thing for us, along with her. So she basically drafted some legislation and went to Lansing, and I went with her and testified before the legislature that joint custody was something that Michigan should have, and that law was passed. So it's got a real true place in my heart, in the sense that I know that there's things that we can do to make family life better for people. Sometimes it's changing a law. Sometimes it's just giving people an understanding of how the system works. And sometimes it's just helping them get through a really difficult time so they can get to the other side. Fortunately, after that legislation was passed, my parents both had custody, and my father stayed in our lives. My best friend at the time, my girlfriend, was going through the exact same thing, only her father disappeared and she never really saw him again until she was an adult. And that experience of how it was to have your parents in your life versus not was very influential to me about how important that can be to somebody for the rest of their life.
That's very, very telling.
Did you have a follow-up, Larry, or did anyone else have any questions at this point?
I didn't know if others had questions.
No one is chiming in just yet. So if you had a follow-up, Larry, or else I can ask one of the questions I tend to ask.
No, I do have. I tried to focus my practice over the last 45 years in an area away from divorce, a lot of personal injury, but I've been getting back into absorbing cases, both when Jessica Fox left my office and when Mike Thompson retired on March 13th, COVID. And Mike had been with me 32 years. So he had some divorce cases and I took them over. I found a new respect for divorce lawyers. And I was set for trial in front of Judge Lisa McCormick by Zoom. And of course, Zoom is like anything else. Necessity is the mother of invention. And it, you know, before March, I don't know if anyone knew about Zoom, but we sure learned in a hurry. And I indicated that when we got up to the day of the trial to start, the case actually finally put both parties in a perspective. They realized it was going to go to trial. And sometimes, just like going to the courthouse physically, the case resolved on the courthouse steps. But it took a huge amount of energy to just get to that point and convince people that the deal that was put together was not going to make anybody happy. So either side. And so anyhow, we were able to resolve it with Judge McCormick's help.
Fantastic.
And so I think it's important that you get to that point where there is a finalization, because then it becomes so much easier, because everybody knows clearly what the rules are and what's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm preparing for trial in a case that I've been working on for years, actually, that's supposed to go to trial right after the election. And I keep thinking that is ultimately what does cause settlement, is people getting to that final wedge place where they may get a decision they don't like and they can't go any farther, and they may be much better off having come up with something that they engaged in and agreed to.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly what happened in our case, because alimony was involved. It was a long-term 27-year marriage. There was drugs and addiction on behalf of the mother. And
Yeah.
So it had a good resolution.
Chris and I were on a call earlier today for the Indigent Defense Collaborative Committee for Ingham County for our Public Defender's Office. And one of the things that Russ Smith was talking about as our public defender is that because a lot of cases have been on hold, that people are not bringing them to resolution, and they're starting to pile up, mostly just because they don't have that wedge quality that we're talking about that brings them to that point where they will be going to trial next week. So there's a lot of cases that are just kind of hovering right now, but I have a feeling that they will resolve just as soon as we can all get back and get the hearings going again.
Yeah, it's an amazing position we're in at this time, but we've found a way to practice. I know that the state bar annual meeting is going to be done by virtual, so it's going to be interesting to see how that's done. But the conventions did it in both the Democratic and Republican convention.
Yeah, I think it's actually going to be an opportunity for us to actually save a lot of time and money and pollution from driving around. I think if we can all get better at this, that it's actually going to become something that we really come to treasure.
I understand in California that they used to do pro-cons by affidavit. Have you given any thought to that, Carol? I mean, we go in with the client and we ask them the questions. Have you lived in the state of Michigan for 180 days? Have you lived in the county for 10 days prior to filing the complaint? There's been a breakdown in the marriage relationship to the extent that the objects of matrimony have been destroyed and there's no reasonable like. Can't we just say that in an affidavit, and wouldn't it be more efficient use of the court time? Although I guess some people want their day in court, but I mean, it seems like with the costs of legal fees and everything else for a great percentage, I think there was a study done down in Benton Harbor, and 80% of the people, 85, appeared in court. Neither one of them had an attorney.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Anything that we can do to sort of eliminate unnecessary time and expense for all the parties would be beneficial. You always run the risk, though, that you may be dealing with someone who is at a greater disadvantage than another. I've seen things come out right as they were about to settle in court in divorce cases and such. Example being where the judge simply asked the person, "Oh, what was it your spouse does for a living?" "Oh, well, she worked for GM for the last 30 years. "Oh, well, did you guys consider any of that?" As they're doing, improper divorce, that they don't know what their rights are. they don't know what they have the right to a piece of pie. And so they can come in and make mistakes that we all have to be very careful that we don't allow people to make mistakes that they will regret for a long, long time.
I have a question actually from the chat that might be a good segue there. Given your exceptional experience in systemic advocacy, do you think you have the patience to move case by case as a neutral decision maker?
Absolutely. I think actually the case by case stuff is sometimes the most interesting, because when you get to know people, you basically get to figure out what their problem is, because they don't actually always know it themselves. What we as attorneys oftentimes find out is that when someone walks into your office, they think they have one problem, and actually they have really a totally different set of problems than they think they have. And I think families have a similar issue, where sometimes they think that they have a jealousy problem, but actually there's a substance abuse issue going on. There's a lot of things that people get kind of over focused on one piece, and they may need or like or benefit from the view of someone on the outside who has looked at enough of these cases to kind of see patterns, where you start to see what people's problem really is.
Thank you. Did anyone have any other questions? Feel free to unmute yourself, or you can put them in the chat or to me privately and I will ask them.
Is Judge Buchanan with us by phone?
She is in via
I'm
Zoom.
here.
Hi, Stacia.
Hey, Larry.
If there are no further questions, I will turn it over to Ms. Koenig for her final comments, statements on the subject.
Well, I don't actually have much of anything prepared as a final statement of sorts. I'm just running for judge is actually new for me too. I've run for county commissioner repeatedly, but this is a different kind of race, and it's been fun to do it so far, but it's going to be a much more expensive race. It's going to be much more challenging than what I've done before, but I'm up to the task, and I can't wait for us to get to November. And I would love the opportunity to serve on the bench. I have known so many judges in Ingham County that I've just had such great respect for, and that have had wonderful careers with the county. Also, having been a commissioner, I really know how to get things done through the county commission, so that if there are things that eventually make themselves obvious that need to be fixed or tweaked in some ways, I have a lot of tools in my tool belt to be able to do that. But it's the kind of thing that I'd probably have to be on the bench for a little while before I'd make any big moves on that. So anyway, I hope that I am going to get your support, or that you'll at least take a look at my website, carolkoenigforjustice.com, or even on Facebook, elect Carol N. Koenig. And that way you can see the list of endorsements that I have and all of the things that I've done, actually in greater detail than we could even go into here. So thank you all very much, and thanks to the Ingham County Bar Association.
Thank you, Ms. Koenig. If there are no further questions, I will go ahead and pause and stop the recording. People are welcome to stick around for a few minutes if they'd like, or if not, everyone have a good night.
Thank you.